celebration of you being inducted into the Hall of Fame.
Well, there wouldn't have been anybody else qualified.
I don't know about that, but when you got the call that you were elected into the Hall of Fame by the board of TCDLA, what was your reaction?
I think the first thing I thought about was, wow, we have really come a long way. I remember having a conversation with the president of a new president of TCDLA, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, and there were no women on the board of TCDLA at that time. And I remember...
Well, I think there were probably always a token or two.
No, there weren't any women on the board at TCDLA at that time, and I made some comment about it. And I know, next thing I knew, I was on the board of directors of TCDLA.
Right.
But I guess I probably wasn't the first one, but at least in my little experience with TCDLA then, there had not been a woman on the board for a while. So, and I know, and then there wasn't a female president until Betty Blackwell, isn't that right?
Betty may have been the first, Lydia was the second. I think now we have 2 women in the officership right now.
Yeah, so having received the call that y'all had considered me for the Hall of
I was
Fame.
not, maybe that's okay.
Okay, but somebody had, and I thought that was just wonderful, very honored, but my thought was, we've come a long way.
Yeah, I think Jo Keegan's who was the first woman in the Hall of Fame, and Shirley Backus was inducted last year, and you and Betty are this year.
They must be trying to make up for lost time.
Or
So women pictures in the list.
Well, one of the you have to be practicing 30 years in order to get into the hall or be eligible for the hall.
Yeah.
And it sort of coincides with your story of that we're going to talk about is you got licensed to practice law in 1984.
Correct.
And you didn't do high school, college, law school like many of us. You took a little side trip.
Having a couple of kids and getting married a couple of times and going to college was sort of what I did in that period of time between high school and when I finally graduated from college when I was 30 and started law school when I was 31 I started college and then I started law school and graduated when I guess I'm going to tell my age, is that right?
No,
I'm not going to.
I mean, well, but so when you started practicing in '84, you already had life experiences that were different than many of us who went straight through. You were a single mother for a while. You were married, had a kid. I think you told me a story once about how you used to lock yourself in the bathroom.
Yeah, that was the way. Somebody said, how in the world did you study? You had a husband, 2 children, a house, a yard, everything to take care of. And I said, well, I designated Sunday as my day. And I would lock myself into the bathroom in my house, and whoever knocked or disrupted me in any way got screamed at. So I would stay in there and read for the following week, make notes on the cases and stuff, and then when I was through, I emerged from the bathroom.
Would you stay in there for 4, 5, 6 hours?
Yes.
Whatever it took?
Yes, except maybe getting water or something to drink or a snack or whatever. But yeah, I hibernated in the restroom until I finished my work for the following week. Sometimes less, sometimes more.
didn't start right away practicing. Well, you started right away practicing with your husband at that time.
That's right.
What was that practice like? What was your practice like at that point?
Well, he had his own office in Houston and criminal practice, and I always thought that I wanted to be a criminal defense lawyer. I just heard so much from him. He graduated from law school, I believe, in 1970. So he had already had a career going and had some pretty serious cases over the years, and I was just enthralled with all of that. And I remember I always asked him, he would be telling me about the facts of one of his cases, and I said, you've got lots of clients, how do you remember the facts of each individual person? And and now I understand, because everybody is different and everybody has a set of facts that pertains only to them. So it is, you can remember everybody's situation. So, but I just thought it was so exciting and so interesting. And I would go down to the courthouse and watch my husband in trial. And I remember seeing a particular lawyer in Houston, female lawyer in Houston. And it was a case where my husband was trying in federal court. And it was had to do with transporting women, young women, across state lines. And it was Hatteras, Penelope Hatteras was her name.
I remember the case.
Yes, and Dick DeGuerin had one of the defendants, and I think Mike DeGuerin, and then my husband Robert had another.
I think Mike Hinton was involved.
Well, I don't remember Mike Hinton, but they were all in court in trial, and I went down to the courthouse to watch a little bit of this trial. Jan Fox represented one of the defendants, and I remember, for some reason, and I wasn't even in law school at that time, but I looked around the tables and I saw all the guys, and they had paper all over the place. Files were everywhere, on the floor, on the table, and Jan was sitting on one side of this big table like they have in federal courts, and her area was, she had notebooks. They call a witness up to the stand. She flipped over to a tab, and there she had all her notes about this person, and her files were neat, and she looked organized, much different from the guys on the other side of the table, and for some reason that made an impression on me. And I thought, I want to be like her. I want to be at a counsel table, and I want to look like I know what I'm doing. Because, I don't know, in my opinion, an impression, whether it's valid or not, sometimes goes a long way. So, and I will never forget that feeling. And I've told her that many times, how she had impressed me and kind of made me feel like, started me thinking about, I could be a lawyer. I never dreamed that would ever be a possibility. But
So you graduated law school and started working with your husband. In about 1986, you got involved with your first capital murder case.
I did. Can you believe that? I mean, 2 years after I got licensed, some judge appointed me to represent a man accused of capital murder. I didn't see the ridiculousness of that at that time. I was very proud. I had seen Robert, my husband, try several capital murder cases, and I just felt like, and I was real happy about being appointed. I thought that is the apex of practicing criminal law. That's as high as you can get. That's as serious as you can get. And it's the type of case that requires the most responsibility, I think, from a lawyer, because you're dealing with somebody's life. Not just how many years they're going to spend in prison, but whether they live or die. And so I jumped into that case like there was, no, I didn't have anything else to do, you know. And finally, I got the case dismissed. That's what should have happened, and it finally did happen. And I thought, wow.
That, you know, one of the reasons, partially, one of the reasons that people nominated you for the Hall of Fame was your commitment in the defense of capital murder cases.
Yes, I am currently working on my 67th capital murder case over the last 33 years, 34 years, 33 years.
How many of them have gone to trial?
Well, I have tried 14 death capital cases and two or three non-death capital cases.
Okay. And the other 50 or 40?
Well, they either got pled out, which in our world, that's a win,
Right.
Or they've been dismissed, or one death and one non-death were not guilty.
All right.
And
We'll talk about those in a second.
okay,
That's a pretty record.
I'm very proud of my record. I really am. I don't mean to make light of that at all. When I talk about 67 of them, it's hard to believe that I've gone through that many people's lives, but it's a record that I am very proud of.
And only 2 of those people have ended up on death rows.
That's correct.
Now, you have the record of being lead counsel on the first case in Harris County from 1975 to the 90s, I believe 76, of getting an acquittal on a death penalty case where the state was seeking the death penalty.
Yes, that was Mr. Durrett, and that was a terrible case. He was accused of bludgeoning to death his sister, his wife, and the wife's sister. And it was a battle, and
Lengthy battle.
lengthy battle, yeah. The case was dismissed once after about a year, I think, of working on that case, or maybe not quite a year, but 1 year later, the state issued another indictment on the same person for the same offense. So none of us could ever figure out, what had changed between the dismissal a year ago and the re-indictment a year later.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, at the time of the first indictment, a woman named Libby Johnson was the DNA analyst at the Harris County lab.
That's correct.
She then got fired.
She did, as a result of an incident that occurred with this particular case.
And as soon as she got fired and moved from Harris County, that's when the indictment was returned.
Yes. It's
And,
nice, isn't it?
What?
That was nice, wasn't it?
Well, but that's just one of the facts of the case.
Yeah.
And that became one of the cornerstones of your defense.
But Libby came back.
Yes. And there was also at the time, and that as part of the case, you were investigating the deceased brother in that case.
Yes.
I remember there was an incident in the courtroom with Chuck Rosenthal, and you were going to call him as a witness. He did call him as a witness, but
That's
he never
correct.
quite that.
This is outside the presence of the jury, in front of the judge, but yes. Chuck
because-
Rosenthal was the lead DA in the case.
And the brother who you suspected made an admission of sexual conduct
With his sister, yes.
with one of the sisters, and Chuck presented you with a check that he was paying, the brother was paying for the silence. When you issued that subpoena for Chuck Rosenthal and then called him as a witness, what were you thinking?
I was thinking I wanted to find out that, I mean, that was something that I didn't know the answer to. I mean, I really, you know, you're always taught, don't ask a question unless you know the answer to it. Well, we didn't know what the end game was going to be. With the way it all started is we got the bank statements from the deceased, and in that bank statement we discovered some checks from the brother to this woman, and we didn't know what they were for. And there had always been a belief that there had been some other person, you know, involved in their death. And so anyway, we asked Mr. Rosenthal to find out, you know, what this money was for. And so I think that began his conversation with the brother, and then the brother just, I guess, upped the story about why he was paying this woman.
It takes a lot of courage to call your opposing counsel as a witness.
Not Chuck Rosenthal.
Yep. You were the defense attorney, you were calling him as a witness, you were going to put him on the witness stand. That took courage in a capital murder case to go outside the box.
Well, I don't know. I think, yes, I agree with you that that was definitely outside the box. I've not ever done that since. But that case was just fraught with things that were outside the box. You know, there was always, it seemed like every day there was a new issue that arose. And it either was as a result of something that the DA had done or not done. And it was constant. But that case was just, it was outside the box. I didn't have any problem doing what I did because I believed in our client. I believed that Joe Durrett was not guilty of the murder of these women.
Well, no, just not guilty. He was innocent.
He was innocent, absolutely.
So that was about 96, 97. And that's during the time that you and I were trying cases together, and you were officering with us.
That's correct.
I think we became friends probably late 80s, early 90s. And you were doing a lot of family work at that time.
Just to eat.
Why?
Why was I doing family? Because that was my meat and potatoes. I didn't make enough money practicing criminal law, but I loved criminal law, and I wasn't about to stop doing it. But, you know, I had a house, I had children, I had to make money. And the easiest way for me was to take family cases and work those up, and then I'd get, I made a pretty good living doing that. But I never gave up criminal. I always had criminal cases, always.
Right.
And I'm kind of going backwards now to where it's just criminal and no family. So it's all working out.
Well, you were tenacious in trial. You were did you develop your own style for cross-examination? Or how did you develop your own style?
I don't know. I mean, that's an interesting question. I don't know that anybody's ever asked me that before. I don't know that I have a style. I just feel like I look at the jury and I kind of form an opinion about what kind of people they are. You've talked to them in capital cases. You've talked to them quite one-on-one for quite some time. So I make a kind of decide who I really want to zero in on and talk to, and kind of try to fit my style to what I think they might think that I was credible. I mean, after all, that's all we're trying to do, is to make the jury believe that we're being truthful and honest with them. God forbid if they ever thought that a lawyer and especially a defense lawyer, was not being truthful. So I don't know. I just kind of be myself, and I'm from East Texas, so I have this somewhat of an accent, and so it gets stronger or it gets less, or whatever in trial. Just never want to look weak. I always want to look organized and prepared, and I don't want. And I would never, ever want to be accused of talking down to a juror, and I know there are some lawyers who can do that, including prosecutors.
But, so you said enough to be fearless,
Yeah.
never let the jury think you're afraid, and also being honest with them.
Yeah.
It's funny that's what I just listened to Dan Cogdale talk about racehorse, and he said those were the two things. Being fearless and don't want the juries to see your fears. That's one of Haynes' greatest strengths.
Well, I've seen Racehorse in the courtroom, and I don't think anybody would ever call him fearful of anything in the courtroom. Anyway, he was really. We're all going to miss him.
Now, as time went on, 96, 97 was this great victory. Used to impress the queen of the criminal bar.
Queen of the good old boys.
Queen of the good old boys. Right?
Yeah. And I think that was interesting looking back on it, the good old boys. I mean, nobody really said that there was a good old boy, male-dominated kind of attitude in criminal law. But I think there was, actually, and so I kind of liked being queen of the good old boys.
And the article put you in the same company with Ramsey and Haynes and Gagarin, Dick and Mike and Schaefer's and Cogdale and me and all us good old boys, and then there's Katherine Scardino. You were on that place on that level by the media. How'd that make you feel?
Well, I never ever felt, and I still don't. I've never felt like I was one of the good old boys. I never, as a woman, and I think being a woman has a lot to do with it, but I never got any of the really big, high-paying criminal cases. Those went to the good old boys, but that's okay. I mean, it was an honor to be considered among those names, and it was. I remember reading that article for the first time, and I didn't know what he was going to write. He just came and interviewed me a couple of times, and I had no idea what he was going to say. And when I saw that picture, and he came to my house and I just thought he was going to take the photographer he sent was just going to take a regular picture of me sitting in a chair in my living room or something. Right. I didn't know what he was going to do. But instead, he wanted something different, and that was why the fringe jacket and the whatever stance I took. I don't know how that came about. But reading that article for the first time, it made me cry.
Why?
Because I just kind of felt like I had done something of some importance to somebody in order to have him write that kind of an article. I just...
Shortly after that, you were hired by the Mexican government
Yes.
to assist lawyers around the state of Texas
Yes.
in death penalty cases.
Yes.
Pretty significant, don't you think?
Yes. That was. I worked for them for several years.
And you were still trying death cases, and that became your focus of your life, was death cases. Several times you said, I'm not doing another one.
That's right. I think I said that rather recently too, but I've got 2 coming up, so 2 death cases coming up.
How did you get involved with the Anthony Graves case?
I got a phone call from, what was that, Austin County? And they asked me to take this case and explain to me what it was. Anthony Graves, they had, not too long prior to the phone call, they had learned that his conviction and sentencing to death had been reversed by the Fifth Circuit. And so there would be a retrial. And I was appointed by this judge to retry him. And so I said, I didn't know anything about Anthony Graves. So, you start reading. And he had some civil lawyers representing him pro bono, some civil lawyers, and there was also some his criminal appellate lawyers. And they,
Jay Burnett was involved.
Jay Burnett
Roy
and
Greenwood.
yes, that's the name I was trying to remember, Roy Greenwood. And they had obviously done a superb job in the appellate level, so I felt a little, it was really important for the criminal defense lawyers who were appointed to represent him on this retrial to do a damn good job. You did not, you would not want to let them down after all that hard work and then have something happen in the second trial that would get him another conviction. So I felt it was a really, really important case. And so I started studying, and I had lots of files and things that were given to me by the civil pro bono lawyers and a lot of investigation. And then I learned about Caceres, Nicole Caceres from the University of St. Thomas, who she and her students had taken it upon themselves to do some investigation and interview a lot of witnesses, and they had come to the conclusion that Anthony Graves, he wasn't just, as you said a moment ago, not guilty. He is absolutely innocent. And so it was a burden in the sense that it was a good burden to have, because it was exciting and a lot of work, but for a good cause.
Do you find it more difficult to represent someone you believe is innocent rather than someone you don't know?
You mean that I don't know whether he's innocent
Right.
or guilty? I find it extremely difficult to represent somebody who I feel is innocent, and I mean innocent. And even not guilty, even if it's the evidence isn't sufficient, to prove beyond a reasonable doubt, facts that rise to the level of beyond a reasonable doubt in a capital murder case, either one of those will keep me up at night. I mean, I literally can't sleep when it gets down close to a trial and one of this significance. And even the other way around, even if you think they're guilty, you still don't want to make a mistake. So it's a lot of pressure. But if you think like Anthony, if you think your client is innocent, there is no greater burden in our field than that.
I know I asked you if I could have the popcorn session on the Anthony Graves trial to watch you and Kelly Siegler try a case against each other.
Yeah.
What were your feelings when Kelly dismissed the charges?
I felt that it should have been done 14 years prior to that. I was a little angry in a way. I was happy, don't get me wrong, ecstatic that Anthony Graves was finally going to get to go home. But I was angry, and I've said this before when I have given speeches at seminars and things. And I felt like this was something, what she did was first of all her job, and secondly, it wasn't any, she didn't do me any favor. She didn't do Anthony any favor. This was something that should have been done. They should have interviewed witnesses. They should have looked at the evidence. They should have looked at the co-defendant and things that he said and come to the conclusion, the same one that Kelly did after a year, I guess, of talking to people and even coming to my office, which I'll tell you about that. But you asked about my impression and how I felt when she dismissed it. I felt like she does not deserve any pats on the back for that. I think she just did what any prosecutor should have done.
You said she came to your office.
Yes. She called me one day and asked me, she said, I want to talk to you about this case. She said, will you let me come to your office? And I said, yeah. I said, I'm going to have Nicole there, and I'm going to have co-defendant Jimmy Phillips there.
Co-defendant?
Mm-hmm. I mean, co-counsel, sorry.
I didn't know Jimmy didn't convict of anything.
Co-counsel. And so,
Jimmy's your husband now.
Yes, he is. And so Kelly came to the office, and she asked to see my files on all the witnesses and the evidence that we had that Anthony Graves was innocent. And Nicole and I kind of looked at each other, and I just made a decision. I said, okay. I said, you can have everything we've got. And I gave it to her. And I gave her names of people to interview. I said, go talk to this person, and here's a letter that you need to look at and read and verify. And apparently she did all that.
Why do you think she did that?
Because I think she didn't want to lose the capital murder case to me.
And that was a real possibility.
A very real possibility. Well, it would have happened if I would have gone down fighting big time on this case.
But you go down fighting in all your cases, don't you?
Well, I don't go down all the time. I mean, sometimes I win a little something. And if I can get a life plea on a guy that I'm pretty certain is guilty, and or the facts which would most likely conclude with a conviction, then I'm happy with that. So.
After Anthony Graves, you represented a man named Brown.
Yes.
Were there any similarities between Anthony Graves and Mr. Brown?
Yeah, there was some, but not all.
What was the Brown case about?
Alfred Wayne Brown was accused of killing a clerk in a bank. I believe it was a bank or I can't remember. I think it was a bank. It was a bank. And there was a guard there, and so the guard was shot, and he's accused of being a party to this, a conspirator to this bank, this robbery, which concluded with a robbery murder. And in the course of that trial, the prosecution withheld telephone records that would have, had they been introduced in trial, could have convinced the jury that he had an alibi, that he could not possibly have been present at the time of this offense. And before I was appointed, I remember reading in the newspaper about this case, and I didn't represent Alfred Dwayne Brown at that time, but reading in the newspaper where the telephone records had been located in the garage of a detective on the case. And the detective, I guess, brought them in. Maybe he got tired of storing them in his garage. I don't know. But anyway, it became apparent that there were actually telephone records that showed that he had made a phone call from one location to another location, which indicated that he could not have been at the bank robbery.
And those charges were dismissed?
They were also dismissed, yes, but without prejudice.
Okay. Without prejudice.
Where Anthony Graves was actually innocent.
So, we've been talking for about 45 minutes now, and who are some of the, I know some of your answers. You talked about Jimmy Fox. You talked about Jimmy Phillips. You and Jimmy have tried a bunch of stuff together, and you've gone to the Supreme Court of the United States and won there together, and you've made quite a team together.
We have.
How many cases have you tried with Jimmy?
About death penalty cases, I think 3 or 4, maybe.
But how many other cases?
Not many. We kind of do capital cases.
Well, you did one in, I think it was Shaver's Court in the
I didn't. What you mean that woman with
No.
racehorse?
No, that was in Godwin's court.
Okay.
What didn't Jimmy have? Didn't you and Jimmy have to take a case to the Supreme Court?
Yeah, that was in Anderson, Mike Anderson's court.
Right. All right.
Yeah, that was that wasn't a capital murder, but yeah, you're right. That was a murder, and oh my gosh, that was an interesting case with a really interesting issue. A young man, 17 years old, at home with his parents, and actually he was 16 at the time, and the cops came out to his house and beat on the door at like 3 o'clock in the morning wanting to see this young man, and the parents let the police officers in, and they hauled him off in his underwear, wouldn't even let him put on any clothes, drove him by the scene of the murder of this young girl who he knew, and sister of a friend of his. And the issue was the constitutionality of the search warrant and the warrant to arrest, and then taking him down and taking in a statement from him without the presence of his parents. And it went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court based upon our research that you'll be surprised at this, that I actually put together the motion to suppress and the memorandum of law to Mike Anderson about why he should not go forward and let the state submit this this statement to the prosecution in a trial. And he, of course, denied it. And so Jimmy, from that point in the trial, knowing that it was denied, he started making records and notes of things, so that he wrote a brief and submitted it to the Supreme Court on that issue. And the Supreme Court ruled in our favor en banc, which means, I've been told that means all of them had the same opinion. No, it was on.
It was always on block.
Procuring. Sorry, get the terms mixed up, but yes.
So, what advice would you give to a young woman who says, I want to be a criminal defense attorney?
I get asked that a lot. I get asked that by young women who want to be criminal defense lawyers, and they come to me and they say, what can we do? And I tell them that first of all, you work your butt off, and secondly,
Get a good psychiatrist.
Get a good home life, because you can't be unhappy at home and be good at what you do in this business anyway. I mean, you can go and be a clerk somewhere and be unhappy, but you got stress at home or unhappiness at home. You can't carry that around with you when you're doing this kind of work, because you deal with trauma and unhappiness. You've got to, you should give all of your attention to this, because this is your mistress. whatever you do, you don't want to be sidetracked on some other feelings. But I tell them that they are so fortunate to live in 2017 and not 1984, where it was hard for women to get into the field of criminal law. When I started practicing criminal law in 1984, there were maybe one or two other women. Marion Rosen, I remember, who I thought was kind of cool back then, and their prosecutors. I think there were several women prosecutors at that time, but there weren't very many women criminal defense lawyers. Especially when my first husband, when Robert got out of law school in 1970, there was only one female in his graduating class, and that was Mary Bacon. But I think the field right now should be so exciting to a woman, because it's new for us the last 20 years anyway. And and it's hard. I know right now, for a long time, I mean, I was probably queen of the good old boys. There wasn't very many women criminal defense lawyers who had handled serious cases and done what I do. But now that's not so. Now there are really, really young, smart women in the criminal defense world now, in TCDLA, in the whole state of Texas. So I'm really proud of the fact that maybe I had some little something to do with some of these women taking the field or the road that they took to get where they are.
I hate to tell you this, Katherine.
Yeah.
You were a trailblazer, and you've been a role model for many women and many men.
I'm just now beginning to realize that I may have been a role model for, I don't know about men, but I know some women have come up to me and said that, and I'm very proud if that is in fact the case. I didn't feel like a trailblazer when I was doing it. I felt like I was just a lawyer. I'm just trying to, and I always felt like I had to be better, than men. I don't know why. Because it's a long, I know why, it's a long story. It's another 45 minutes, but I'm really happy. If I have been a trailblazer, then I think that's just superb.
And that's why you were elected into the TCDLA Hall.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
How's that?